Okay, together. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan et kol darkav, lamo Yisrael kehetavniot, lekol hadevarim, shebashamayim. Blessed are you, Lord our God, everlasting King, who has given all of his ways to his people Israel as pictures of all heavenly things. I have a big teaching today. Don't know if that's going to translate to a long teaching, but we'll see. But it's big, which means you have to really pay attention. You got to have your scriptures in front of you because we're going to go all over the place. And I'm going to try to make it as simple as I can, but I'm telling you right now, it's not simple. It's complicated. Sometimes they're simple, sometimes they're not. This time it's not. So the name of the Torah portion, can we drop the screen down a little bit so that we're not missing the top, please? So the name of the Torah portion is Fight the Four Kings. Fight the Four Kings. So that means that number one, we got to figure out who the four kings are. Number two, we got to figure out why we have to fight them. Number three, we have to figure out who fought them in the first place, and then try to apply ourselves to that. There's a lot here. There's a lot of stuff to unpack here. So we're going to go to a passage that we very rarely read and very rarely discuss. I don't think I've ever taught on this before. So it's in Genesis chapter 14, and they call this the Battle of the Four Kings. Like a lot of your Bibles will have a little header in it. Not in the scriptures, but just like the publisher put in there, called the Battle of the Four Kings. Sounds like a Peter Jackson movie, the Battle of the Four Kings, The Hobbit. But that's where he got all this stuff. That's where Peter Jackson got the whole story for The Hobbit. It was a parable like the Bible. And he spent years and years going Bible, Hobbit, back and forth, to try to make it as close to the original redemption story as possible. And this is one of those weird passages, narratives, that just kind of comes out of nowhere and then disappears. And so very few people comment on it. Very little is commented on in Rashi and the other sages. Very little commentary on it. So it's one of those hidden things. All right, so let's read this, at least the part that I've trimmed it down to, because this is about 1/3 of the text. I figured I'm just going to go for the most appropriate parts, make it as simple as I can. It came about in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar. Now, you might know that as Shinar, which is Babylon. It's another name for Babylon, Shinar. Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedar Laomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goyim. These are the main characters that we're going to be talking about. And it's basically the places, not the guys, but the places that they're from. Shinar, Elasar, Elam, and Goyim. You guys know the word Goyim. What does Goyim mean? Nations or Gentiles. You know that word. These four kings from Babylon, from Shinar, they made war with Bera, king of Sodom. Now let me stop here. At this time, previously in the text, Lot and Abraham had left Ur together. Then they went down to Egypt together. Then they came back up to Canaan together. And then they had so much gold and silver and herds and flocks and stuff like that, that Lot said, you know what, there's not enough room in this place for me and my stuff. And he got greedy. And Abraham, being the kind person that he was, said, okay, if you go that way, I'll go that way. And if you go that way, I'll go that way. Let's just split. You can go do your own thing, I'll do my thing, and we'll be fine. So what did Lot choose? He chose the most beautiful, well-watered part in all of Israel, Sodom and Gomorrah. Really? Yeah. Sodom and Amorah. It's not Gomorrah, it's Amorah. It was the most beautiful place in all of Israel, down by the Dead Sea. And it even says in the scriptures, well watered in the circle of the plain, and there's fruit trees, and there's fields, and there's gardens. It was gorgeous. Not like it is after what happened to it. But there's 5 kings that are in that area. Bera, king of Sodom, Birsha, king of Amorah, Shinav, king of Admah, that's right near Sodom and Gomorrah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. Now, Zoar is the actual town that Lot chose to go live in. So they're all clustered together. And that's exactly where Lot went. And so all these 5 kings from that area, it says in the all these came as allies to the valley of Siddim. Siddim is the Salt Sea. It wasn't Salt Sea then, but it's the Salt Sea now. In the 14th year, Cheder Laomer and the kings who were with him, that's the Babylon, the kings of Babylon, came and defeated the Rephaim. The Rephaim are giants. So Babylon, this is not a small force. This is huge. We'll say 1 million-man army from Babylon. And they come down, they defeat the giants, and the Emim, which are also called giants in the book of Numbers, and the Horites in Mount Seir. Then they turned back and came to Kadesh, you know where that is, and conquered all the country of Amalek. Amalek is our eternal enemy. These are no slouches. This is an enormous force. And nobody can stand before them. The kings of Babylon. And the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, came out, and they lined up for battle, 4 kings against 5. Then they, the kings of Babylon, took all the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their food supply, and they left. They also took Lot, because that's where he was living. So these 4 kings from Babylon came, and they just trounced the kings in that beautiful, beautiful valley. And they took Lot, because that's where he was living. Avram's nephew and his possessions, and departed, because he was living in Sodom. Now we're going to skip to Genesis 14, 13 through 20, and then just one verse, chapter 15, verse 1. Then a survivor came and told Avram the Hebrew. Now he was residing by the oaks of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and brother of Aner, and they were allies with Avram. Now what's going to happen is Avram is going to go to war against this 1 million-man army of Babylon. Abraham is going to take them on. But these allies of his don't go with him. It says they're allies, but they don't go because they're scared. They know better. Now he was residing by the oaks of Mamre, the Amorite, the brother of Eshcol and brother of Aner, and they were allies with Avram. When Avram heard that his brother had been taken captive, he led out his trained men born in his house, 318 against a 1 million-man army. This is stupid. This is like one of the stupidest things in the whole Bible. You know how everybody loves to talk about the Gideon, that he goes out with a few thousand, several thousand men, and then God says, no, that's too many. And so he narrows it down, and he says, no, it's still too many. He says, okay, how do you want me to narrow it down? Everybody who goes and laps up the water like a dog, those are the ones that I'm going to choose. And everybody gets so excited about that battle, and Gideon goes out and he wins. That's nothing compared to this. 318 guys, 319, counting Abraham, against a 1 million-man army. And by the way, guess what the rabbis say? It wasn't 318, it was 1. Eliezer. Why? Because Eliezer's name adds up to 318. In the letters. So I don't think that's true, but it's true prophetically. It's 1 man against a 1 million-man army. That's prophetically true. I'm going to show you that. That's what we're going to look at. Like the bottom line of this whole teaching is that 1 guy goes out and slaughters 1 million men. That's the bottom line of the teaching. But he's got people with him that do the fighting too. So it says that born in his house 318, and they went in pursuit as far as Dan, that's northern Israel. Then he divided his force against them by night, he and his servant. Servant, it says in Hebrew, singular. That's why the rabbis say it was one guy, Eliezer. Because it doesn't say servants in Hebrew. It says servant, singular. Why is that? Because scripturally, pictorially, metaphorically, it is one guy who does this. That's what I'm going to show you. And they defeated them, the 1,000,000-man army, and pursued them as far as the north of Damascus in Syria. He brought back all the possessions and also brought back his relative Lot with his possessions and also the women and the people. So you would think that Lot would be incredibly grateful, right? No. No. Guess where he goes? He goes right back to Sodom. Isn't that ridiculous? He goes right back. Then after his return from the defeat of Cheder Laomer, that's the king of Babylon, and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh. Remember, the king of Sodom is the one who got whipped. He goes out to meet Abraham in the valley of Shaveh, that is the king's valley. Now this is actually the valley of Kidron. Valley of Shaveh is the Kidron Valley. So where is he next to? Jerusalem. He's at Jerusalem now. And that's where the king of Sodom goes to meet him. And because he's at the valley, because he's at Jerusalem, the king of Jerusalem comes out. And this is an amazing thing that happens. And in Hebrews chapter 7, there's a whole chapter about it. So they come to the king's valley, later to be the Kidron Valley, and Melchizedek, the king of Shalem, brought out bread and wine. Now he was a priest of El Elyon, that means God Most High, and he blessed him and said, "Blessed be Avram of El Elyon, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be El Elyon, who has handed over your enemies to you." And he gave him a tenth of everything. Now the he is Abraham, and the one who received the tithe is Melchizedek, but he's an angel. It says in Hebrews that he's got no genealogy, he's got no mother, he's got no father, and he's from heaven. So he's an angel. What the heck is he going to do with the spoils of war from a 1,000,000-man battle? What's he going to do with it? So here's where we get the doctrine and the truth of this. And this, I know it sounds weird, but this is true. Melchizedek took all that stuff, physical stuff, back to heaven. And he put it in what's called the Otsar, the Otsarim, which is storehouses. There were storehouses in the temple. What was the temple a picture of? Heaven. That means there's storehouses in heaven. Now, I know you've heard this in the church. From the storehouses of heaven you shall be blessed, and things like that, right? You've heard that, yes? There really are storehouses in heaven. But you don't have any stuff there, and neither do I. Abraham does. Because he literally had it taken by Melchizedek and literally had it taken back to heaven. Now, who is Melchizedek the priest of? El Elyon, God Most High. What is he the king of? King of Jerusalem. Shalem. He's the king over Shalem. Now, I don't have that here because it was just too... No, I do have it here. And Melchizedek, the king of Shalem. Well, Shalem is Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. That's Jerusalem. But my question is it the king of Jerusalem on earth or the king of Jerusalem in heaven? Yes. No, it's the king of Jerusalem on earth. Because he's not the king of Jerusalem in heaven. Who's the king of Jerusalem in heaven? God. This guy's just an angel. When David set up the kingdom, he set up the kingdom, it says in 1 Chronicles 28, according to the pattern in writing that he saw by the Spirit. In other words, he set up all the divisions of the priests according to the divisions of the priests in heaven. So how many divisions of priests are there on earth? Or how many were there on earth? 24. That means there are, to this day, 24 courses of angels in heaven. countless angels, but they're divided into courses. Melchizedek is the head over one of those courses, just one of them. He's not the king of the world. God is the king of the world. He's Melchizedek. And he took the tithe, just like a priest, back to Jerusalem in heaven. Now, I know that sounds weird, but it's the truth. I don't know how to get stuff put in the storehouses in heaven. I don't know how to do that. I've studied it for a long time, and I still don't know how to do it. Maybe I'm doing it, and I just don't know. Maybe, I don't know. But I do know this. I do know that Abraham literally, physically, had all the spoils that he took from this battle of the 4 kings, had it brought back to heaven. And it's waiting there for him. Maybe it's waiting for all of us, the children of Abraham. Probably so. That's a lot of stuff. Think about it. All those who have faith are called B'nai Avraham, the children of Abraham, right? You recognize that from the New Testament? That all those who have faith are called the children of Abraham. And all those who know Yeshua are going to the kingdom on earth, but we're also going to heaven in the resurrection, and then we're going to come to the kingdom on earth. Well, what happened to all that stuff that Abraham had brought to heaven? I assume that it's waiting for all those who are children of heaven, children of Abraham. Maybe, maybe not, but I do know it was taken there to heaven. Make sense? Does that make sense? Now, this is developed by many, many, many passages in Scripture, but I'm just going to say that for right now. So, then, the very, very end, it says, the last sentence of the second paragraph, it says, who has handed over your enemies to you, and he, Avram, gave him, Melech Tzaddik, or Melchizedek, 1/10 of everything. After these things, now when it says after these things are the war between the 4 kings and the 5 kings. The battle of the 4 kings. So after the battle of the 4 kings, what happened? The word of the Lord came to Avram in a vision saying, don't be afraid, Avram. He just went against a 1,000,000-man army. And God says, don't be afraid? Isn't that strange? Why would God say don't be afraid? Unless he's afraid. So what he's afraid of is, the sages go on and on and on and on about what was he afraid of? And they all basically come to the same conclusion because of the passage that follows. Anybody have a guess as to what he was afraid of? Because it's in the passage that follows. No, not dying. Good guess, though.
Not having a seed.
That's it. Not having an heir, not having a seed. Very good, Chris. Not having a seed. That's what he was terrified of. I mean, he's over 100 years old. No, he's not. He's almost 100 years old. He's almost 100 years old, and he's getting older and older and older, and he's scared he's not going to have a seed. His wife is like 90, almost 90. So that's what he's afraid of. Now, what he says is, don't be afraid, Avram. I'm a shield to you. Your reward will be very great. Now, that's the end of the teaching. That's the last thing we're going to look at. So let's talk about this battle of the 4 kings. Here's a map. If you want, you can turn those lights off so you can see it better. So we have 4 kings. We have Amraphel, the king of Shinar. Now, Shinar is it's used all through the Bible for Babylon. It's just another word or synonym for Babylon. Amraphel, king of Babylon. Now in the map you can see the red part, that's Babylon. It says land of Shinar. It's huge. And just in case you don't know, here's how it happened historically. You know about Egypt. Egypt was the first major power that, attacked the Jews and enslaved them. And we came out, God delivered us from Egypt. Well, who was the big major power after that? Assyria. You can see Assyria up north of Babylon. And then it just dropped down a little south, and Babylon destroyed Assyria. And then it drops down a little farther south, and it goes to Elam, or Persia, Medo-Persia. Medo-Persia attacked Babylon and took over. So it just keeps going farther and farther southeast. Now, what amazes me, can I use that pointer? What amazes me is that I never really understood that Israel and Jerusalem is directly east from Babylon. So a lot of times in the Bible it'll say, and the people of the east, and it means Babylon. Or the land of the east, and it means Babylon. And I'm like, it is directly east from Israel to Babylon. But you have to go in what's called the Fertile Crescent. Thank you very much. The Fertile Crescent, which is, it's a big crescent like this. That's called the Fertile Crescent. And so, this is where Abraham was born. And he lived. Ur, see this little town here, a little city? Ur of Chazdim, Ur of Chaldea, Ur of Shinar. Up here is Babylon, the city of Babylon, right on the river, right on the Euphrates River. Look up, see that? Nimrud? Guess who that's named for? Nimrod. That's how you say Nimrod in Hebrew, Nimrud. That's his name. So this is where Nimrod reigned, in Assyria. And then he just kind of dropped farther and farther and farther south. Close to Nineveh. Yeah, it's right near Nineveh. Because it says that Nimrod built Nineveh, the great city. So this is where all the problems started. Let's drop down a little bit to the land of Shinar. And that was the end of the story. For the rest of the Bible, these are the bad guys for the rest of the Bible. Now it went over here into Shushan and Persia, which is called Elam. Now here's where it gets confusing. You see that little town down on the south of the land of Shinar? I don't know if you can read that. Can you read that? No. Okay, I'm sorry. It says Larsa, the town of Larsa, which is Elasar. So when we have Arioch, the king of Elasar, it's down here by, it's right in Babylon. But this is Persia. So they kind of overlapped. So this guy down here, this is Persia. This became part of Persia. All right, so it gets a little confusing because of this one word right here. Elam. You know what Elam means? Persia. It means Persia. Yeah, that is the land of Persia. But it's not Persia here. So we have Amraphel, the king of Babylon, Arioch, king of Elasar, down here, which became Persia. Then we have Cheder Laomer, king of Elam. This is Elam, but he's not the king of Elam, you're going to find out. He's the king of something else. And Tidal, king of Goyim. We don't know where that is. You know why? It's not a place. It's not even a place. We'll talk about that. So I got two long passages here. We got to read the whole thing of both of them in order for you to understand. So before we read this is what you're going to see. You're going to see this. That this guy, Tidal, king of Goyim, is a prophecy. He's a picture of the final kingdom on earth, which is coming shortly. You would know it as the Antichrist. It's the false Messiah. The kingdom of the false Messiah. And this is the words of rabbis, not Michael Washer. This is what the rabbis say. The rabbis say that this guy, Tidal, king of Goyim, is all the Gentiles. Because it's Goyim, which means Gentiles. And prophetically, it's a picture of the fourth king, which we're going to look at. So, in order to understand this, we got to read both of these big passages. First one. This is from a really cool website called Judaism and Rome. Very scholarly. It's kind of hard for me to read because I'm not that smart, but it's really well documented and well researched. So it says this, their authors. Now, when it says their authors, it's talking about the Genesis Rabbah, which means big Midrash Rabbah, big stories, big parables. These are the first parables that were ever told about the Bible in Judaism. These are the pictures, the big original pictures. And we're supposed to know them, by the way. They're quoted all over the New Testament. Did you know that? That the Midrashim are quoted all throughout the New Testament. And people read it and they're like, oh, that's amazing. That's the Word of God. No, it's a parable from the Midrashim. And unless you understand the Midrashim, the original parables of Judaism, you cannot understand what's being said in the New Testament in those passages. So it says their authors, the authors of Genesis Rabbah, show an awareness that the Roman Empire consists of numerous nations from which their soldiers are conscripted. You probably know this. I mean, it's this kind of common knowledge, I think, that Rome, the kingdom of Rome, was not the kingdom of Rome. It was the kingdom of all of Europe and Asia. All the peoples of Europe and Asia, right? No matter where you were from in Europe and Asia, you ended up in the Roman Empire, and you were a Roman. Although these peoples are ruled by a single kingdom, they remain distinct from one another. Furthermore, its subjects are not all considered Romans. In commentary on Daniel 4:8, here we go. This is the nut of what we're going to look at. Daniel, the book of Daniel, is what we're going to look at. In commentary on Daniel 4:8, however, it says, however, the now ruling animal, we're going to look at animals, is not one nation, but it is a collection of all languages and of all human races. And it is a raising of troops. That means getting troops from all the Gentiles who are not, they're also called Romans, but they don't originate from one country. So what is it saying? It's saying that Rome as a kingdom is all kol goyim. All the goyim. All the goyim. So therefore, this guy, Tidal, the king of Goyim, is a picture of what? The Roman Empire. These are not my words. These are the words of the sages. That Tidal, king of Goyim, all the way back in Abraham, during Abraham, is a picture of the kingdom of Rome. Then it says, see also the commentary on Ammianus Marcellinus Res Gestae 31:16-8. Not a clue what that means, but that's good because it's giving documentation for what she's talking about, which I like. It's documented. You can read about this. It's not her words. And then it says, the Midrash also notes that Rome recruits soldiers from the nations in other biblical contexts. In other words, in the Midrashim of the sages, of the rabbis, that it'll pick out a verse from the Bible and go, you see proof that Rome is all the Gentiles. That's what she's saying. Let's see. Roman enlistment of troops from throughout the nations also appears in, this is a long title, Pesikta de Rav Kahana HaChodesh Hazeh, Pisca 7. Pisca means passage 7. Okay, that's a big title, but she's giving documentation from Judaism that proves this. So what is it proving? It's proving one thing, that Rome is not Rome. Rome is Kol HaGoyim. Think about this. It's all the Gentiles. Now, when you get to the book of Revelation, you're at the end of the book. You're supposed to know everything that came before it, right? Yeah. Like reading a novel. You're supposed to know the plot. You're supposed to know the characters. You're supposed to know the conflict. You're supposed to know the resolution. You're supposed to know everything by the time you get to the end of that book. And all it does is kind of wrap it up in a neat bow. But people read it like it's new information. That information is found in these sources that are quoted by this woman. It's in the Midrashim, it's in the Pesikta, which is an ancient Midrash. It's in all of Judaism, all the stuff you read in the book of Revelation. So if you don't know this stuff, you don't know what you're reading in the book of Revelation. We're going to read from the book of Revelation. But hopefully I'm going to give you enough understanding, foundation from Judaism so you can know what you're looking at. That's what I'm hoping to do today. Does that make sense? Yeah. We'll see if it works. That's what I'm going to try to do. Okay, now there's commentary. This is right out of Ramban. Ramban is a rabbi named Nachmanides. He was the head rabbi of Spain in the 11 and 1200s. Okay, a long time ago. Now, Ramban says this. This is his commentary on the verse. It came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, king of Babylon. This is what he says. This event happened to Abraham in order to teach us, okay, hold on. In other words, he's saying this is a picture. Right. He's saying this is a picture. So what does he say it's a picture of? He says that it's a picture of 4 kingdoms that will arise to rule the world. These are not my words, these are the words of the sages. That the 4 kingdoms that will arise are pictured by these 4 kings. By king of Shinar, king of Elasar, king of Elam, king of Goyim. And they're going to rise to rule the world. In the end. The end of what? The end of life? The end of the story? The end of what? It's talking about Haketz, the day of the Lord. When the rabbis say the end, they are saying Haketz, the end, which is in Daniel and in Genesis, which is talking about the day of the Lord. So when he says, in the end, he's talking about the day of the Lord. In the day of the Lord, Abraham's children will prevail over them. Over who? The 4 kings. He did. He beat them. So what it's saying is it's going to happen again. That Abraham and his little tiny, little minuscule crap army, his little nothings, his little garbage boys, are going to go kill a 1,000,000-man army. It's going to happen again. Isn't that bizarre? We can turn the lights back on, by the way. So he says that it's going to happen again. And they, the 4 kings, will fall into their hands, into the Jews' hands. What do you think of that? It's going to happen again. Then they will return all their captives and all their wealth. Our rabbis have already mentioned this matter. See what he says? He says, these are my words. These are the words of the ancient rabbis, the ancient sages. They've already talked about it in Avodah Zarah 10a. Rabbi Yossi said, for 6 years, the Greeks ruled in Elam. What does Elam mean? Persia. Persia. Remember I told you this gets confusing because of this word Elam. Elam means Persia. Shushan is the capital. Elam, way down here. But he says, the rabbi, Nachmanides says that Rabbi Yossi said that down in Elam, down here, the Greeks started reigning and ruling. You follow what I'm saying? Who was the leader of the Greeks? Who was the first Greek leader? Alexander, right. So they're saying this isn't about Persia. This is about the Greeks. When you read Elam here in these 4 kings, it's not Elam, Persia, it's the Greeks. So it gets a little confusing. So he says, for 6 years the Greeks ruled in Elam, and after that their kingdom spread all over the entire world. So where did the Greek kingdom start, they say? In Persia, in Elam. Then it says, Ramban explains it as meaning nations, Gentiles. And it is hence an allusion to Rome, whose kings ruled over many nations, an allusion to the king of Rome, who ruled over a city comprised of many peoples. Now look at this. Kittim. Kittim, by all the rabbis, means Rome. All the rabbis. In fact, when they're translating the scriptures and it says Kittim, they don't even say Kittim. They say Rome. In all their writings, they just write Rome. Kittim is Rome. Well, who else is Rome in Judaism? Edom. Edom is Rome. Remember Edom, the bad guy, the brother of Jacob? Edom is Rome. He's synonymous with Rome. They don't even say Edom. When they read Edom, they write and say Rome in Judaism. So he says Kittim, Edom, and the rest of the Gentiles. This is Rome. And then it says, this is Babylon. I'm sorry. And the Midrash further says in 42:4, and it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, this is Babylon. We know this, that Shinar is synonymous with Babylon. Then it says, Arioch, king of Elasar, this is Medo-Persia. Right? Did you follow that? Elasar, remember that town that you can't see here? Larsa, Elasar? That's Medo-Persia. Well, who took over Babylon? Medo-Persia. So let's go through the kingdoms again. We had Egypt way down south. Then we had Assyria. Who took over Assyria? Babylon. Who took over Babylon? Medo-Persia. Who took over Medo-Persia? Greece. Who took over Greece? Rome. That's history. That's the trail of history. So he says, Shinar, this is Babylon. And Arioch, king of Elasar, this is Media. And Cheder Laomer, king of Elam, which means Persia, this is Greece. And Tidal, king of Goyim, that is the kingdom Rome, which collects levies from all the nations of the world. So what it's saying is this, real simply, that these four kings of Shinar, of Elasar, of Elam, and of Goyim are in order the four kingdoms that ruled the world. Did you follow that? I know that's complicated, but it's saying that it's in order, that it goes in order. Shinar, Babylon, Elasar, Medo-Persia, Elam, Greece, Goyim, Rome. So that sets us up to look at this whole battle of the four kings prophetically. We had to do all that to understand this as a prophecy. Okay. Hopefully, I'm going to make this clear for you. I know that was a lot, and we're just getting started. We're just getting started. So there's two prophecies in the book of Daniel. Daniel 2, where the king, Nebuchadnezzar, sees this giant statue in a dream. And then in Daniel 7, where Daniel sees this weird prophecy, and he sees in a dream, he sees one animal, two animals, three animals, fourth animal. Remember it said in the words of the rabbis, and this animal was made up of many nations. Remember that? I said we're going to look at animals. Here's the animals that it's talking about. So Daniel 2. You, O king, were watching, and behold, there was a single great statue, and that statue, which was large, was standing in front of you. It was amazing. Awesome. The head of that statue was gold. Its chest and its arms were silver. Its belly and thighs. Now, when it says thighs, it doesn't mean thighs, it means penis. That's what it means. Its belly and penis were bronze. Its legs of iron. Its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. Then it says a stone was broken off with that. And by the way, he's telling Nebuchadnezzar what he saw in a dream. What Nebuchadnezzar saw in a dream. He's saying, Nebuchadnezzar said, if you guys can't tell me what I dreamt and tell me what it meant, I'm going to kill you. All of you. All of you wizards and necromancers and magicians and wise men, if you don't tell me what I dreamt last night and what it means, I'm going to kill you and turn your house into a latrine. That's what it says. So somebody tells him about Daniel, and he says, there's this Jew boy over there, and he's able to, probably he can do it. He usually translates dreams. And so they drag Daniel in, and he goes, I've got no wisdom, but God can tell you what you saw. All right, do it. And so he does. He tells Nebuchadnezzar what Nebuchadnezzar dreamt, which I think is even greater than translating it. Then he told him what he dreamt. Isn't that weird? What if I came to you and said, tell me what I dreamt last night, and if you don't, I'm going to kill your children. And you go, oh, okay, I'll tell you what you dreamt. And I'll tell you what it meant. That's how weird this is. So he says, a stone was broken off without hands, and it struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and crushed them. Then the iron and the clay and the bronze and the silver and the gold were crushed to pieces all at the same time. But the stone that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. And then the days of those kings, now when it says those kings, it's not talking about this and this and this and this. It's talking about these kings, because that's the time period that he's talking about. How many toes are there? Okay, so that's going to keep coming back over and over again. There's 10 toes. That's 10 kings. So in the days of those kings, in the days of the toes kings, where'd it go? And in the days of the toe kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed. It, the kingdom, will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, but it itself will endure forever. So ultimately, this whole thing that Nebuchadnezzar saw, what's it about ultimately? The day of the Lord, the kingdom. It's about the kingdom. I have told you so many times, I can't even count, that every single thing in the Bible is about one thing. It's not about Jesus. It's about the kingdom. Yes, ultimately it's about Yeshua, but it's really the bottom line to everything in the Bible is the kingdom. And if you don't see it through those lenses of where's the kingdom in this, you're going to miss what's being said. It's just that simple. So you got to change the way you're viewing the Bible. It is about the kingdom. Everything you read, every verse, every chapter, every story, every parable, every narrative, it's all about the kingdom. And this dream was all about the kingdom. And then he says, it will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, but it itself will endure forever. Now we go to Daniel chapter 7, the other vision. Now this vision Daniel has. Daniel said, I was looking in my vision, and there's 4 great beasts, behemoth. A beast is behemah in Hebrew, behemah. And it doesn't mean, the beast, the number 666. That's not what it's talking. It's talking about animals, beasts, behemoth, beasts. I was looking in my vision, and 4 behemoth gedolot, 4 great, huge beasts were coming up out of the sea. What is the sea in the Bible? Gentiles. Very good. So these beasts were coming up out of the Gentiles, different from each other. The first was like a lion, but it had wings of an eagle. And look, another beast, a second one, resembling a bear. And they said to it, arise, devour much meat. After this, another one, like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings. The beast also had 4 heads, so it has 4 wings and 4 heads, the leopard. And after this, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and very strong, with large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet. Everything. It crushed and trampled down everything with its feet. It had 10 horns, and another horn, another little one came up. This is what he said. The fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom. Okay, who's the fourth kingdom in the four kingdoms that attacked and took all the stuff from Sodom? Oh, do you remember his name? Oh, there it is. It's right there. Tidal. Tidal, king of Goyim. No, not title. Tidal, king of Goyim. Say it. Tidal, king of Goyim, king of Gentiles. He's the fourth king. Yes? The legs of iron are the fourth king. 1, Babylon. 2, Medo-Persia. 3, Greece. 4, Rome. Fourth beast. 1, Babylon. 2, Medo-Persia. 3, Greece. 4, the Tyrannosaurus Rex with the horns on his head is Rome. That's the fourth kingdom. So all of this, the whole thing, the whole story, the whole midrash, the whole parable, the whole metaphor is about Tidal, king of Goyim, being Rome. That's what the whole bottom line is. And if you don't understand that, you do not understand this passage of what happened to Abraham and how great it was that basically one guy beat a 1,000,000-man army. And why? Why did he do this? As a picture of what's going to happen when? In the days of the 10 kings, the 10 toes. In the days of the Tyrannosaurus Rex. The dread, I don't know what to call it, it's just a horrible beast. Godzilla. Right, exactly right. And then it says, it will devour the whole earth, trample it down, crush it. The little horn that came up, remember there's an 11th that comes up. He, the horn, will intend to make alterations in times and in Torah. This little horn that comes up will change the Torah. He will intend, that's his intent, to change Torah. That's his intent. What does he want to do? Change the Torah. And he will make changes in times. Times, in other words, the Moedim, the new moon, the Shabbat. Changing Shabbat to Sunday. Just getting rid of the new moon. We don't need that anymore. Changing Passover to Easter. Changing Hanukkah to Christmas. Changing Sukkot to Christmas. Changing, what other changes? Just getting rid of all the Jewish stuff and changing it into something else. That's his intent. Yetzer, intent. And this is the little horn that comes up. He will intend to make alterations in times and in Torah. And he'll do this for a time, times, and a half a time. What does that mean? Time, times, I can't do this, and half a time. 3.5 years. Year, 2 years, and half a year. 3.5 years. Then the majesty of kingdoms will be given to the holy people of the highest one. Malchutcha, malchut kol olamim, umemsheltecha b'kol dor vador. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion endures forever. That's where it comes from. And all kingdoms, plural, will serve him. All right, have you got a picture in your head now of what's going on? That king of Shinar, king of Elisar, king of Elam, king of Goyim are a picture of Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and then Rome. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and then Rome. But what's the feet? Yeah, but when? When? That's the question. Okay. Here's another just a very small portion of what Rashi said when he says, King of Goyim. Think about that phrase, King of Gentiles. Tidal, King of Gentiles. Think of that phrase, King of Gentiles. What is it in Hebrew? Melech Goyim. Melech Goyim. Well, who's the Melech Goyim? Who's the King of the nations? Who's the King of nations? Isn't it God? No? You don't recognize God as the King of the nations? Huh. You look confused. All right. So, let's look at this word Tidal. Tidal. That's the name of the guy who's the King of nations. Tidal, it comes from Dachal. Dachal, which is Aramaic. It's not Hebrew. And it corresponds to this number 2119, which means to slink, like to slink. In other words, fear. To fear, causatively, to be something that causes fear, to be formidable, to be terrifying, terrorizing. Like Godzilla, 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 Godzilla. I really like that. Because there's a song about it, so it's easy to remember. Godzilla. So, to cause fear, to make afraid, to be dreadful, fearful, terrible. These are the words that are used to describe the fourth beast. It doesn't even describe it as an animal. It just says it's horrible, terrible, fearful. This is exactly what it says. Now, Jusinius' Hebrew lexicon says that tid'al means to fear or awe. And it comes from the Samaritan root. Samaritans are not good guys, they're bad guys, horrible guys, they're Nazis. There's no such thing as a good Samaritan. That's a parable, it's a metaphor, just to piss the Jews off. Yeshua told it just to make them mad. He was saying, there was a good Nazi who came along. That's what he's saying. So it's from the Samaritan, Da'al. And here it is in Samaritan. That's how it's written in Samaritan, Da'al. Which means literally fear. So it's like Godzilla, to cause fear. And that's what this dude is. Tid'al. The Godzilla of the Gentiles. That's him. Now, let's talk about Melech Goyim, the King of the Gentiles. There's two passages, there's more, but I only put two here, just to keep it simple. That God is Melech HaGoyim. God is the King of the Gentiles. 2 Chronicles 26 says, Jehoshaphat said, Lord God of our fathers, are you not God in the heavens? Are you not ruler over all the Melachim Goyim, the kingdoms of the Gentiles, the Malchut Goyim? Are you not king over all the Gentiles? Power and might are in your hands so that nobody can stand against you. Jeremiah 10:7, who would not fear you, O Melech Goyim, O King of the Gentiles? For it is your due. The whole world should exalt you. For among all the wise men of the Gentiles and in all their kingdoms, there's nothing like you. Ein lo, there is nothing else. There's nothing like you. So this is talking about God. God is the Melech Goyim, but so is the bad guy. And you had said, when I said, who's Melech Goyim, you said Hasatan, right? You said Hasatan. Because, among many other passages, Yeshua is taken by Hasatan up to the pinnacle of the temple, which means the northeast corner, southeast corner of the Temple Mount. It's not on the temple itself, because there's a place that was literally the highest point on the Temple Mount, and that was the southeast corner of the Temple Mount. And it was called the place of trumpeting. And if you fell from that, you fell into the valley of Kidron from that height. And so he took him there to the place of trumpeting, the blowing of the shofars for Shabbat and the new moons. And he said, I can give you all these nations if you bow down and worship me. Well, how can he do that? Because he's Melech Goyim. He's the King of the Gentiles. but only because God gave him authority over the Gentiles. Because God is Melech Goyim, King of the Gentiles. Does that make sense? All right. So he's also Melech Goyim. So what I'm going to tell you is this. It is the height of stupidity for Christians to pray against the Antichrist. It is the height of stupidity for Christians to try to pray away the tidal wave, and I'm using that word on purpose, the tidal wave of evil that is coming. It is coming. You can see it in the prophecies that were given to Daniel and to Nebuchadnezzar. It is coming. And you can see it in the tens of thousands of passages in the Bible that describe it in detail. And a few little Christians going, oh, I rebuke you, Satan. It's foolishness. Because that tidal wave is coming. And there's nothing that anybody can do about it. All we can do is pray for us to be strong, and for us to have understanding of the kingdom, and for us to know God. And that's it. And pray for those who are also believers to be protected. That's about it. You're not going to pray the president out of office. You're not going to pray for these, people that are the puppet masters on the planet to go away. It's not going to happen. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes. That's not our job. Our job is to know God. Our job is to know the kingdom. Our job is to understand the scriptures so that we can know God and know what's going on. Not to make it go away so we can have a pretty life. And I am mocking because it's a height of foolishness. Now, there's a lot of passages about Hasatan and therefore the false Messiah. Don't ever say Antichrist, by the way. There's no such word as Antichrist. I mean, that's not even a word. It's false Messiah. I mean, if you're going to say Antichrist, why don't you say the rest of the sentence in Greek? Because that's Greek, it's not English. This doesn't make any sense at all. So it's false Messiah. And it's very important that you say that, because if you're not talking about the false Messiah, you're not talking about the biblical guy. If you say Antichrist, that's not even a thing. You're not even discussing the same guy. Does that make sense? So you're going to have to change your vocabulary from Christ to Messiah and Antichrist to false Messiah. The Antichrist. They don't even say Antichrist, they say Antichrist. It's important because the more we change our mind to biblical words, the more we think like this book. That's how it works. You have to brainwash yourself. So I'm not going to call him Antichrist. I'm going to say false Messiah. He is the Melech Goyim. Isaiah 19, 1 through 4 says this, God says, I will incite Egyptians against Egyptians, and they will fight each against his brother, and each against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. Does that sound familiar to you? Yes. From Matthew 24 that you've heard quoted 10 billion times in the church? And then they say, it's the coming of Christ. Well, here it is, word for word. At least that part. Word for word. And it's talking about the day of the Lord. In the passage, if you read it, it says, in that day. And it says, day of the Lord, in Isaiah 19. So God says he will incite city against city, kingdom against kingdom. Also, I will hand the Egyptians over to a cruel master, and a fierce king will rule over them. This is the false Messiah. What does it call him? A cruel master and a fierce what? King. Melech. He is Melech HaGoyim. He's the fierce king. Now in Daniel 8, there's a prophecy about a shaggy goat and a ram that has 2 horns, and the shaggy goat has 1 horn. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'll just go to the part where he translates it, where he tells us what it means. The shaggy goat is the kingdom of Greece. Who is the leader of Greece?
Alexander.
Come on, who is the leader of Greece? Alexander. This is talking about Alexander's in the Bible. This is talking about Alexander. The kingdom of Greece is the shaggy goat. That's Alexander. He's the 1 horn. And the large horn, Alexander, that was between his eyes, is the first king. That's Alexander. The broken horn and the 4 horns that came up in its place are 4 kingdoms which will arise. Now I have it written here for you. I don't know if you can read this, but the 4 kings that came up are 4 horns. The big one got broken and 4 came up. These are Ptolemy, Seleucus, Cassander, and Lysimachus. These were his 4 generals. And they led the kingdom of Greece, because Alexander only lived to the age of 33. Isn't that interesting? Just like Yeshua. He started his ministry of death at the age of 30, just like Yeshua. And he only very, very quickly took over the whole world in 3 years. And then he died. And these 4 guys came up. That's the 4 horns. And then it says, the 4 horns that came up in its place are 4 kingdoms which will arise, though not with his power. In the latter time of their dominion, Acharit Yamim is latter time. Do you guys know what the Acharit Yamim is? Anybody know what the Acharit Yamim is, the latter time? The latter days. The latter days.
Is that the last 3.5 years?
No, it's the day of the Lord. It's just a phrase for the day of the Lord. But it says in the day of the Lord, during their dominion. What? These guys reigned 300 to 250 BCE. 250 to 300 years before Yeshua. But it puts them in the day of the Lord. Did you catch that? Yes. Yes, they're coming back. These 4 guys are coming back into the day of the Lord. And we know this because what it says is, from one of the horns came another little horn that spoke against the God of gods and all the gods and said, he's God. Who's that? The false Messiah, which is in the day of the Lord. So this is coming back. And we know that because it says in the Acharit, in the latter days of their dominion, when evildoers have run their course. That's the day of the Lord. A king will arise, insolent and skilled in intrigue. His power will be mighty. A fierce king will rule over them. This is the same guy. It's the false Messiah. In their days, a king will arise, insolent, it means arrogant, and skilled in intrigue. His power will be mighty, and he will destroy amazingly. Oh Lord, I rebuke Satan. This guy's going to destroy the whole earth. And a few little Christians on their knees praying to Christ to rebuke Satan somehow. It's the height of foolishness. It's the height of foolishness. How did this happen? That we ended up with little, people getting on their knees and saying, I rebuke you, Satan. And thinking that they're going to change all of history. You need to think about it. He will destroy amazingly. Now in Daniel chapter 11, this is the longest prophecy in the whole Bible. It takes up all of chapter 10 and all of chapter 11, and the whole thing is about Hanukkah. All about the festival of Hanukkah. And it's the longest prophecy in the whole Bible. In my big book, When All the Pictures Are Restored, I have every verse written and the translation historically of every single verse in this prophecy. So it says, at the Moed, that means a biblical festival, he, the king of the north, will return and come into the south. Now what's happening is there's a battle that goes back and forth for hundreds of years between the king of the north and the king of the south. And it just goes, and this literally happened in the past. And what it created was the king of the north, the final king of the north, called Antiochus Epiphanes. You know what Epiphanes means? God in flesh. This guy called himself, I am God in flesh. Antiochus the fourth. Big fat bald old guy with no beard. But on all his coins, he has long flowing hair and a little Greek beard. And he looks like Christ. False Messiah. But he was a real guy. At the Moed, he, the king of the north, will return and come into the south. But ships of Kittim, remember I told you, Kittim, the sages just say Rome. Ships of Rome will come against him. Who's him? Who is the king of the north? The false Messiah. Now look at this. At the Moed, the king of the north, we'll just say the false Messiah, okay? To make it simple. You following me? Okay. The king of the north will return and come into the south. That's Egypt. But ships of Rome will come against the false Messiah. I thought the false Messiah was Rome. Right. He comes from Rome, but he ain't Rome. That's a whole other can of poo-poo. You know who that is? That's the 10 toes. Kittim, Rome, is the 10 toes. And he's separate from them, but he is one of them. He is Rome, but he's not Rome. He's separate from Rome. Rome makes war on him, and he makes war on Rome, but he's Rome. So it's kind of like you have a brother, and he's a jerk. He's your brother, but he treats you like he's not your brother. He always does the stupid thing, gets your car wrecked, kills your dog, takes your wife, beats your children, and he keeps repenting. But he's your brother, so what are you going to do? That's how this is. So Rome will come against the false Messiah. So the false Messiah would withdraw in fear. There's that word, fear. And curse the Holy Covenant. Forces from the false Messiah will arise, desecrate the sanctuary, and do away with the sacrifices. What has the church done more work to do than any other thing? Spread the gospel of Christ? No. Get rid of Judaism. Right. And the number one thing that makes us different from all the other nations is our relationship with God, because we get to offer sacrifices, the picture of Yeshua. The rest of the nations don't. We do. And so what does Hellenism do? Works to take that away. And that's what he's going to do. He's going to do away with the sacrificial system and set up the Abomination of Desolation. I know you know what that is, I think. You do, don't you? Do you know what the Abomination of Desolation is? Do you? Yes or no? No. You don't? Okay, the Abomination of Desolation is an idol of the false Messiah that's erected on the altar. And all the Jews are told to worship him. He's an image. He's the false Messiah, and it's an image of him that all the world has to worship. That's what.
So that's his intent.
That's right. That is his intent, to break Torah, to do away with Torah. That's right. Set up the Abomination of Desolation. And what does he do first? Before he sets up the Abomination of Desolation, gets rid of the sacrifices. If you think that Christ is the final sacrifice, you are deceived. The Bible never says that. It says that the sacrifices are a picture to teach you about Yeshua as a sacrifice. That's all it says. And without that picture, we cannot understand the sacrifice of Yeshua. We can't. We can get a thimbleful, but it was given to us so we can understand. And this guy takes it and throws it away. Do away with the sacrifices. Now, if the church hasn't done that, it hasn't done anything. Because that is its intent. All you have to do, if you don't believe me, just go talk to a pastor. Are we supposed to be doing sacrifices? Just ask them that and watch what happens. Oh no, Christ was the final sacrifice. You need to stay way away from that. Just ask one. Ask 10. I have. And set up the abomination of desolation. The king, now he's called a king. The king will do as he pleases. And he will exalt himself and boast against every god, and will speak disgusting things against the God of gods. Now, in the vision, one of those horns of Seleucus, I'll just tell you that, it was of Seleucus. That's where Antiochus Epiphanes came from. It has another little horn grow out, and it speaks horrible things against God. That's why it's got a mouth. He's speaking horrible things. Can you see that? I know it's small. And will speak disgusting things against the God of gods, and he will be successful. The false Messiah is going to be successful at destroying Judaism, at destroying the Jews, at destroying believers. He will be successful. That's what the scriptures say. Until the indignation, that's the birth pangs, is finished. And he will honor a God of fortresses, a God whom his fathers did not know. He will honor him with gold and silver and precious stones and treasures. Pretty things, right. So, Melech Goyim is the false Messiah. The fierce king. Now we come to Revelation that you think you understand. And I know you think you do. I know you do. Every Christian I've ever talked to thinks they do. Because they've heard it many times. And just by the fact that they've heard it a lot, they think they know what they're hearing. But unless you understand all of this background, and by the way, I've just given you a thimbleful of the Jewish background. Just the tip of the iceberg. But even with that, you should be able to understand what you're looking at now. But people read this and they hear it and they've heard it preached and they think they know what it means. They do not know what it means. A great sign appeared, a woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, on her head a crown of 12 stars. How do we know that's Israel? 2 words. 2 words. Thank you, Eileen. Say it louder. Joseph's dream. That's how we know. Because Joseph dreamt about his mom and his dad and his brothers as the sun and the moon and the 11 stars. He's the 12th. So a great picture, metaphor, tavnit, appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, that's Israel. The moon, that's Rachel, under her feet. Moon under her feet is Rachel. On her head, a crown of 12 stars. That's the 12 boys, Israel. She, Israel, was pregnant and she cried out, being in labor and in pain to give birth. What is this? The birth pangs. The birth pangs. If you ask Christians, they don't know the phrase birth pangs. So this is why I say they read it and they hear it over and over again. But if you say birth pangs to a Christian, they don't know really what that means. Jews do, because it's from Judaism. So they're in birth pangs. She, Israel, is in birth pangs. And she's going to give birth to what? A baby boy. Who's the baby boy? The Messiah. Another sign appeared in heaven, a great red dragon. Now the dragon in the Bible is Leviathan or Leviathan. I usually teach this around Passover. that there's many, many verses that describe for us the dragon. In Hebrew, the word is tanin. Tanin. And it is described very clearly as Leviathan. Job chapter 41, there's a whole chapter about Leviathan. And guess who the other guy is in that chapter? It's Leviathan and then the other guy. Remember who the other guy is? Behemoth. Behemoth. What does that mean? The beast. The beast. Behema. Remember I said at the beginning of the teaching, Behema is beast? It doesn't mean the Antichrist. It's the beast. The beast. There's 4 beasts. Well, in Job chapter 41, it talks about Leviathan, and then it talks about Behemoth, the beast.
But
They are not one in the same. They're not one in the same until the birth pangs. Then they are one in the same. Well, just like we saw in the vision. How many beasts are there in the vision? Oh, I can't do this. How many beasts are there in the vision? There's 4. But only in the day of the Lord is the beast. Right? Okay. I know it's confusing because there's a lot of mixed metaphors. There's a lot of metaphors one on top of the other. And you have to, I was going to talk about this. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just going to say it. You have to be nimble. You know what nimble means? That means like, flexible. Like you can leap from one thing to another. When you're looking at pictures, you must be nimble. Because you have picture on top of picture on top of picture on top of picture. And you've got to be able to go from picture 1 to picture 4 to picture 3 to picture 2 to picture 1 to picture 4. And over, flip-flopping back and forth. Hellenism teaches you not to do that. It teaches you to go, the Word of God says this. Period. End of story. Don't they? Haven't you heard that? Word of God says this. Period. End of story. Haven't you heard that? I've heard it many times. Word of God only. Word of God only. That's what that is. There's no nimbleness in it. There's no flexibility to leap from picture to picture, which is what this is. You're leaping from this picture down to this picture, which is different, to this picture, to this picture, to this picture, to this picture, back to this picture, down to this picture, over to here, down to here, up here, over here. And you got to be able to be nimble, flexible. All right, so that's what Revelation 12 is doing. It's flip-flopping around from picture to picture. And it says, now watch, here's where it gets confusing. Here's where it gets confusing. If you're not nimble. Another sign, a great red Leviathan, dragon, having 7 heads. Do you see 7 heads in any here?
No.
Is there a beast here with 7 heads? No. And 10 horns. Is there a beast with 10 horns? No, but there's a beast with 10 what? Toes. The 10 toes are the 10 horns. This is being nimble. You leap from picture to picture. The 10 toes are the same picture as the 10 horns. Same thing. Does that make sense? 7 heads and 10 horns. And on his heads were 7 crowns. Well, why are there 7 crowns? Because there's 7 heads. Kings, right. There's 7 kings, there's 7 heads. So who are the 7 heads, the 7 kings in Judaism? Or through Jewish history? We'll just make it simple. Who were the 7 nations that ruled the world? Egypt. And then who was the next one? You don't remember? Okay, we'll go back. Eileen, can you turn the lights off, please? Egypt, down here, right? Who was the next great world power? Assyria, good. Who was the next great world power? Babylon, good. Who was the next great world power? Medo-Persia, good. And then who was the next great power? Greece. And then who was the next great world power? Rome. All right.
That's 6.
Right. That's 6.
Who is modern day Rome?
There's no such thing. Egypt is first, Assyria is second, Babylon is third, Medo-Persia is fourth, fifth is Greece, sixth is Rome, but look at the statue. That's the longest part of the statue, isn't it?
Yeah.
It never stopped.
Just keeps going.
It just keeps going from the first century. Rome has never ended. So when you say, who is Rome nowadays? Same as it's always been. It never stopped. Hold on. And then look at the 10. We said, remember those passages we looked at from the rabbis that said it's all the nations. Kol Goyim. Remember? That all the nations came, that's what Rome was. It was all the nations.
And if he said that if it's not Israel, it's Rome?
Yes, you can say, if it ain't Israel, it's Rome.
Right.
Yes. Edom, Jacob. That's all there was. There were no other kids. There was Jacob, which is Israel, and who is his brother? Edom, which is Rome. So yes, you can say that. Okay, we have Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and then Rome. Look at the statue. What are the 10 toes? What are the feet made out of? Clay and iron. They never stopped. It never stopped. It just comes back again as clay mixed with iron. So I used to call it re-Rome, but I thought that was just, people couldn't get their head wrapped around it. So now I call it Rome Revised. It's the revival of the Roman Empire. Do you know that, you've heard the Third Reich, right?
Yeah.
What's the Third Reich mean? Do you even know? Right, the Third Reign. The Third Reign of what? Rome. You had the Western Roman Empire, which is Rome. Then you had the Eastern Roman Empire, which is called the Constantinople. What's the other name for it?
Ottoman Empire?
Not the Ottoman Empire. What's it called? Constantinople. Constantinople and the Eastern Orthodox. You've heard of the Eastern Orthodox? That's what that is.
Okay.
There's a whole religion called Eastern Orthodox Catholicism.
Yeah.
That's from the Western Roman Empire. That's the second reign of Rome. And it went on for about 1,000 years. And then that died out, and then the Nazis came and said, we are the Third Reich, the third reign of Rome. That's why it's called the Third Reich. We didn't name it. They named it themselves and said, we are the revival of Rome. You didn't know that, huh? So that's the 10 toes. Iron and clay. So it says, Revelation 13, the next chapter of Revelation, I saw a beast, a behemoth, coming up out of the sea. Now it's a beast. You got to be nimble. You got to switch from picture to picture. Having 10 horns. What are the 10 horns the same picture as? What's 10 in these pictures?
Toes.
The toes, 10 toes. So he sees 10 horns, which is the same as 10 toes, and 7 heads. Who are the 7 heads? Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and then Rome again. Rome revised. And on his horns, how many horns does he have?
7.
No.
Oh, 10.
10 horns. Now he's got 10. In the first prophecy, he had 7 heads, 10 horns, 7 crowns. Now in this one, he has 10 horns and 7 heads. And on his horns were 10 crowns, same as 10 toes. On his heads, blasphemous names, disgusting names. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Who's the leopard?
Greece.
Who?
Greece.
Greece.
Yeah, that's Greece.
Greece. This is the Antichrist. This is the false Messiah. And who's he like? No. Who's he like? Which beast is he like?
The leopard.
The leopard. Alexander the Great and the 4 kings that took over Alexander's Greek king. It does not say that the false Messiah is like Medo-Persia or like Babylon even. It says that the false Messiah is like Greece. Now, if you don't learn anything else today, learn this. Hellenism wants to take Judaism away from you. That's its only job, 24/7. And there was only one group of people who made war against Hellenism in the Middle East. Only one. And they were tiny. It was a family. It started out as just one family. And if you don't learn anything else, you've got to learn this, that Hellenism, the way of the Greek, is the ultimate picture of the false Messiah. And that's what the church is inundated with. Do you hear what I'm saying? I've been carrying this around inside of me for 36 years. And I can't get anybody to hear it. Not even this group. Because I'll say it, and then 2 months later you forget. And then I go over it again, and you're like, what? And then people on the internet who are watching the teaching, they can't get it. Because it's so, think about what I'm saying. Think about what I'm saying. And it doesn't say that the beast was like a leopard and like a bear and like a Godzilla and like Babylon, the lion. It doesn't say that. It says that the false Messiah was like Greece. And this is in the New Testament, guys. The beast that I saw was like a leopard. And his feet, just the way he walked, was like a lion. Lumbering, unstoppable. Just too many forces, too many to beat. But he himself is like Alexander the Great and Hellenism. His feet were like a bear. His mouth was like the mouth of the lion. Who's the lion? Who's the lion? Come on. Who's the lion? Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar. The one who said, I am God. And then God humbled him and turned him into what? A beast. Turned him into a beast. As a picture of the false Messiah. And how long was he a beast?
7 years.
7 years. Because the beast is going to be around for 7 years. But he only talks like him. He is not like him. He's like Greece. Do you hear what I'm saying? Now, yeah. But, it's just like anything else. There's no such thing as news anymore. There's only propaganda. There's no such thing as comedy anymore and comedians. There's only propaganda. There's no such thing as social activists anymore. There's only propaganda. There's no such thing as politics anymore. There's only propaganda. And all of it is focused on one thing. The leopard. Hellenism. You think it's been hard so far to get people to go toward Judaism? You ain't seen nothing yet. I used to think that messianic music was going to spread and believers were going to start doing more messianic stuff. It's going the opposite direction. We were talking about this the other day. That music, I really thought it was going to go more toward messianic. It's getting farther and farther and farther away from it among believers. It's getting more and more Hellenized. The leopard. His mouth, like the mouth of Nebuchadnezzar. And the dragon, the Tannin, gave him, the false Messiah, his the dragon's power, and his, the dragon's throne, and great authority. This is kind of scary. Revelation 17. Now we come back to, we're going to come back to this. We're going to circle back to the original passage. Revelation 17:1 and verse 5, and then verses 7 through 13. Hopefully you can understand this now. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 fire pans, not bowls, it's not bowls, came and spoke with me, saying, "Come here, I'll show you the judgment of the great prostitute who sits on many waters." What are the waters? Nations, Gentiles. On her forehead was a name. Her name, Bavel Hagadol, Babylon the Great. This is the beast having a prostitute who's riding Godzilla. You got Godzilla and you got this whore up on the prostitute. She's riding Godzilla, right? And she's putting on her makeup and she's, seducing the whole world. And on her forehead is this name, Bavel Hagadol. Who's she riding?
Babylon.
No, she is Babylon. Who's she riding? Who's she riding? Godzilla, the false Messiah, Rome. Okay, you got it. You got to mix your metaphors here. You got to have all the metaphors in front of you at the same time now. Got to be nimble. So she has on her forehead the name Bavel Hagadol, mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. I'll tell you the mystery of this woman, Babylon, and of the beast. Who's the beast? The false Messiah. In all 4 kingdoms. In all 4 kingdoms. How many idols is this?
5.
No. How many idols is this?
1.
How many idols is it?
1.
It's 1. It's 1. It's just divided into different parts. But how many idols is it?
1.
It's 1. That's what Nebuchadnezzar saw. He saw 1 idol. And they're united into 1. But there's different parts, but it's 1 idol. So the false Messiah was in Babylon, was in Medo-Persia, was in Greece, was in Rome, and is going to be in Rome Revised. Yes?
Yes.
So you're going to have to be even more nimble now. I'll tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast, the false Messiah, in all 4 kingdoms that carries Babylon, which the beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that you saw, now it's going to get really complicated. The beast that you saw, where am I? The beast that you saw was in the past, and it is not now, and is about to come up out of hell and go to destruction. Now he's gonna say this again, but he's gonna explain it a little better, because right now he's just saying it. He was, and is not, and will come. He was in the past. He's not right now, but he's going to be in the future. He's going to come back. The 7 heads are 7 mountains that the woman sits on. I have read, I cannot tell you how many Christian commentaries that say, this is the 7 hills of Rome. Because in Roman literature, there are 7 hills of Rome. And so they immediately go to 7 hills of Rome in Roman literature. Where are there 7 mountains in the Bible? You don't remember? Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and Rome Revised. What's a mountain? Remember the stone that hit the feet?
Yeah.
What did it grow into? A mountain. And it's called the kingdom. Yes? A mountain is a kingdom in the Bible. A mountain is a kingdom. And so he says, here's another metaphor. He says, the 7 heads, who are the 7 heads? Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. There are also 7 mountains that the woman sits on. Babylon sits on these 7 kingdoms. Are you with me so far? Well, we're mixing several metaphors at the same time now. And people read this and think they know what they're reading. This is, you need cue cards with this. This is tough. You cannot possibly know this unless you know all of these metaphors. Now do you see what I'm saying when I say Christians read this and think they know what they're reading? And I know I'm speaking broadly. I know that. So don't take it as broad. Take it as the ones who do this. That's who I'm talking about. The 7 heads are 7 mountains. Those are the 7 kingdoms that the woman sits on. And they are 7 kings. So now we got 3 metaphors, one on top of the other. On top of the other. We have mountains, heads, and kings. And there's 7 of them. And they're all the same thing. What are the 7 kingdoms? I'll get you started. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, Rome revised. Rome again. Okay, good. That was good. There are 7 kings. 5 have fallen. Now he's in the 1st century and talking about that time period. In that time period, in the 1st century, 5 had fallen. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. In the 1st century, who was the ruling power? Rome. 5 have fallen, and 1 is Rome. That's Rome. And the other hasn't come yet. Who's that? Rome. Rome 2.0. Right. I like that. You got that. You got 2 today. Rome revised. Right. Rome 2.0. The beast, which was and is not, is himself also. Now we got another one. An 8th. Now we got another one. Another metaphor. There's an 8th. It's the 7th, but it's also the 8th.
Like the goat, shaggy goat with the extra horn coming off.
Yes, like the shaggy goat with the extra horn coming out from the 4 horns. That is correct. All right. Where'd I go? The beast which was and is not is himself also an 8th. Now this is the false Messiah straight up. And is one of the 7. Which one of the 7? No. Rome. Because it's Rome revised that the false Messiah is the head over. So Rome's the big one. But listen, you got to mix your metaphors here. I know it's tough. Rome is the big one. I'm the idol. That's the biggest kingdom, right? The legs are the longest part of the body. Yes? So Rome is the biggest thing. And it never goes away. But it says the false Messiah is like the leopard, like Hellenism. The world power that never left is Rome. The influence and the false Messiah within it is Greece. This is why Hellenism is so dangerous. I'm not God. I can't judge. I wish I could, because then I could be clearer about what's going to happen to people. And people ask me all the time, well, what about this group? What about that group? I don't know. All I know is Hellenism has influenced everybody. And its point is to take you away from God and into this world power. I don't mean Biden. I don't mean politics. I mean Hellenism, which owns and operates the church from top to bottom, from Messianic Judaism to Dutch Catholicism. Everything, every single tiniest bit of God's body on earth is owned and operated by Hellenism. And to get away from that is indescribably difficult. And then once you start getting away from it, to not be mean about it is even harder. And I'm trying. I'm really trying not to be mean about it.
We're really bound by it, whether we like it or not.
We are bound by it.
We're bound by it because we can fight all we want against it, but at the end of the day, something as simple as the holidays, the pagan holidays,
Yeah.
like Christmas, we have to take it off. I can't work that day.
You know, right. It's everywhere. It has influenced every single area of our life. But listen, you have to try to get away from it. You have to work at it every day. You have to. Well, you don't have to, really. But I'm saying you have to because you're supposed to, right?
Michael, which
We're
was the
supposed to.
kingdom that was obsessed with trying to unite everyone into a single power?
The one that was obsessed that was trying to unite all the world into one power is Alexander the Great.
So
Yes.
that spirit of Greece is what's coming to unite everybody.
Well, I got to get it on tape. Honey. That spirit of Greece is what is coming, of Alexander the Great, and Hellenism is what is coming to unite the whole world into, quote, one, how do they say it? One world order. The new world order. Yeah, I don't even like to say that because that's something that people say. It's a one unified system. Yeah. One unified world. One world. That's the Tyrannosaurus Rex, the Godzilla of God. But it is like the leopard. All right. So, this is a lot here. But if you can figure out who the 7 heads are, you got a big head start. So the false Messiah is an 8th because he's an actual guy, an individual human being. But he's also one of the 7, which is Rome. This is a passage from my book, When All the Pictures Are Restored, in the Hanukkah chapter. It says this: the Antichrist, or false Messiah, the beast to come, is like a leopard. He tramples over the earth with the lumbering power of Medo-Persia, the bear. He speaks with the arrogant mouth of Babylon, the lion. But ultimately, the false Messiah, the beast, is like Greece, the leopard. The false Messiah who receives his power from Hasatan is like the culture, the lifestyle, the worldview, the schema of Greece, and that is Hellenism. The kingdom is coming soon. Hellenism is sweeping the earth to prepare the ground for the false Messiah's vile harvest of souls. Hellenism comes with its message focused on these 4 elements. Number 1, there it is, unity between all peoples. That's the number 1 thing. Number 2, homosexuality as a virtue. Why? Because it does away with family, with a normal family unit. Did you know that our head of transportation right now, the head of transportation is AWOL, while the whole world is sitting in a dock. There's no shipping going on. All these, I feel so sorry for you dealing with shipping and trucks. I mean, everything's ground to a halt. And the head of transportation right now is on maternity leave. It's a man. He's AWOL because he's on maternity leave because he and his husband adopted a child. So he's on maternity leave. He didn't give birth to that child, but he's on maternity leave. It does away with family. Number 3, physical perfection as a focus. I don't talk about that much, but you got to be careful of that. Gets your mind off the kingdom and on me. Number 4, idolatry and philosophical oratory. Now, in the past, that was the big thing. What does that translate now into our day? Political correctness and tolerance. The religion of tolerance. That is the basics of Hellenism. So, you need to start learning how to spot this when it comes and not be mean about it. That's the hard part. Not be mean. Be kind, be generous, be loving, but be firm. That's the way it is. Just speak the way it is. So now we circle back to the beginning. And the end of the story of the Battle of the Four Kings, when Abraham killed a 1,000,000-man army, how many people was this that went against 319? But it was really one. It was really one. So, Abraham knew God. Would you agree with that statement? That he knew God? This Gentile? Gentile, totally pagan Gentile. He knew God. And those who fought Hellenism along with him knew God. Why? Because he taught them to know God. At least that's what Judaism teaches. Now there are 2 verses here that you need to know. I always teach this at Hanukkah. Zechariah 9:13 says, and this is God speaking. This is God speaking. Well, wait, first, look at me first. Jesus said all kinds of stuff about turn the other cheek and not to, I don't even know what he said. I don't even know the stupid trite phrases that people quote. But everybody quotes these trite phrases like turn the other cheek and stuff like that. Don't ever, ever have a sword. Don't ever go to war. Don't ever do battle. Right?
Yeah.
That's what Christ said. At least that's what people quote. But the truth is that Yeshua never said those things. He said those things in response to the same things being said in the Torah that people misquoted. And he said, the scriptures don't say that. They say this. That's what he was saying. He was quoting Torah. Zechariah 9:13, God says, I, God, will bend Judah like a bow, and I'll fill that bow with the arrow called Ephraim, which is the northern kingdom of Israel. Jews is the bow, Israel is the arrow, and God says he's going to do that. And he's going to shoot that bow at somebody. So my question is, who's he going to shoot it at? I will fill the bow with Ephraim and stir up your sons, O Tzion, against your sons, O Greece. Isn't that a trip? That's the only holy war that God will stir up Judaism against Hellenism. If you feel that inside of you, that's God. If the Holy Spirit is making you go, oh, Hellenism has got me by the throat, that's God. Because he's stirring up the Jew dude in you to, right? To shoot at the Hellenism inside of you. This takes place inside of us. It literally took place. Physically took place. And this is the story of Hanukkah. That the Maccabees were the only people who ever stood against the onslaught of Hellenism. In the whole world, only one people did this. And it wasn't the Muslims. It was the Maccabees. In between the Testaments is what it's called. 186 BCE. That's when they got rid of the Abomination of Desolation, cleansed the altar, and reinstituted Judaism. And they went to war against the Syrian Greeks over and over and over and over, and they beat the Greeks and beat the Greeks and beat the Greeks and beat the Greeks with a tiny, tiny little force of Jews. And they're the only ones who've ever done it. And nowadays, you don't ever find a Maccabee. You cannot find a Maccabee nowadays because Jews have bent over backwards for Hellenism. You go to any Messianic congregation, any Jewish congregation, except very, very, very few that are ultra-Orthodox. They're the only ones who stand against the Hellenism that has come like a tidal wave. By the way, the phrase tidal wave is in the Bible 5 times. A tidal wave of Hellenism against Judaism. And it has taken over the synagogue. But these guys stood against it. Why? Because God said, I will do that. I will raise up the Jews against Hellenism. So my question for you is, can you picture yourself like going against a 1,000,000-man army, the horde of Hellenism, like Abraham did? Because it's going to happen again. Daniel 11:32, and that longest prophecy in the whole Bible about the Maccabees and Hellenism, it says this: by smooth words he, the false Messiah, will turn to godlessness those who act wickedly toward the covenant is Judaism. He's going to turn to godlessness. Though, don't think this doesn't have to do with us. It does. He's going to turn to godlessness those who act wickedly against Judaism. But the people who know their God will be the only ones who are strong and act. This was the Maccabees. It's the only prophecy in the whole Bible about the literal physical people called the Maccabees. Maccabees means hammer. The Maccabees, the hammer. Zechariah 9, we just quoted, and then Obadiah 1 and Zechariah 12. Both are passages about this. Abraham went with how many people? 318. And him makes 319. But it was really one. Well, it's going to happen again. There's going to be all the believers who accompany Yeshua when he comes to just trounce the enemy. Obadiah 1, for the day of the Lord is near upon all the Gentiles. On Mount Zion shall be deliverance, and it will be holy. And the house of Jacob will be a fire, and the house of Joseph, Jacob and Joseph, that's Ephraim, a flame. But the house of Esau, Rome, stubble. And they will set them on fire and consume them, so there's no survivor of the house of Esau, Rome. And the captivity of this host of the children of Israel shall possess that of the Canaanites. The kingdom shall be the Lord's. And by the way, this is the only verse in the whole Bible, in the whole Tanakh, that has Hamlucha, the kingdom. The only verse. Lots of verses that describe the kingdom and say the kingdom will be, or his kingdom. But this is the only one that has the word Hamlucha, the kingdom. Isn't that interesting? Starts out with the day of the Lord and ends with the kingdom. And it's just going to be like throwing a flamethrower into a pile of dry kindling. This is talking about the believers, what they're going to do to Rome. Zechariah 12, in that day I will make the clans of Judah like a fire pot among pieces of wood. There it is again. And a flaming torch among sheaves, so that they will consume on the right and the left all the surrounding peoples, while the inhabitants of Jerusalem again live on their own sites in Jerusalem. Isaiah 63, who is this who comes from Edom? What's Edom? Who's Edom? Rome. With garments of bright colors. Why is your apparel red? Your garments like one who treads in the winepress. And God says, I have trodden the winepress. What does it say? One person. But it's not one person. We just saw that all of Judah and all of Ephraim come and help. But it says, I've done it alone. Just like Abraham was alone. It was just him and one other guy. He did it alone. Pictorially. Not in reality. There was 319 in reality. But pictorially, he did it alone. You see why the rabbis say that and why it's written in singular? In the beginning of the story, it's singular. It says, and he came with his servant and wiped out a 1,000,000-man army.
That means that he didn't have any allies to help him.
Yes, I had said that earlier, that those guys that were his allies did not go with him. He was alone. And by the way, here he says, I was just freaked out that nobody went with me. He says that about his allies. I have trodden the winepress alone. I trod them in my anger, trampled them in my wrath, and their blood is sprinkled on all my garments. I stained all my clothes, for the day of vengeance was in my heart. I looked, but there was nobody to help. So my own arm brought salvation to me. Not true, God. We're going to go with you. But no, he's going to do it alone because we're going to be with him. Strange, huh? That's how it is. You got to mix your metaphors in this case. I trampled down the peoples in my anger. I made them drunk with my wrath and poured out their blood on the earth. And this is quoted almost verbatim in Revelation 19, which people in the church quote constantly, but they don't know what they're reading. Revelation 19, 11 through 15. I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it is called Emunah ve'emet, faith and truth. In righteousness he judges and wages war. See? He's alone. He judges and makes war. And then it says we go with him. So he's not alone. He is alone. He's not alone. He is alone. Isn't that strange? But that's the way it's written. Why? Because we are him. We're him. We're his what? Body. We're him. We're his body. You should have answered that real loud. You didn't answer it. It kind of freaks me out. So he says, he judges and wages war. He is clothed with a robe dipped in blood. And the armies which are in heaven, clothed in fine linen, following him on white horses. From his mouth comes a sharp sword, so that with it he may strike down the Gentiles. And he will rule them with a rod of iron. And he treads the winepress of the fierce wrath of God, alone. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies assembled to make war against him, not him, his army. That's us. We're coming from heaven on white horses, following the Messiah who's just, spattered it completely in blood. And they're like, no, we can still win. And the beast was seized and thrown alive into the wadi of fire. Look at this. This is by Rabbi Yossi Ives. After these things, Abraham's defeat of Babylon, after these things, the word of the Lord came to Avram in a vision, saying, do not fear, Avram. Remember what he was afraid of? Not having seed, not having a kid. I am a shield to you. Your reward will be very great. So he's basically saying, don't worry, you're going to have a kid. Now look at this. It is, lots of kids. It is especially surprising to say that Abraham, of all people, was concerned about his reward. When Maimonides singles out Abraham as a paragon of serving God purely out of love, that's in the Mishnah Torah, Hilchot Teshuvah 10:2. Abraham, Maimonides says, was the perfect example of someone who occupies himself in the study of Torah. There is no Torah. Is there? At the time of Abraham? not for 430 years. 430 years. And the fulfillment of mitzvot. There are no mitzvot for 430 years. And yet, Maimonides says he's the perfect example of somebody who just shows his love for God by doing Judaism. And there is no Judaism to be done. So that's why I have Genesis 26:5 here. And the Lord appeared to him, to Isaac, and said, don't go down to Egypt, stay in the land of which I shall tell you. For to you and to your seed I will give all these lands, and by your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because, only for this reason, that Abraham did these 5 things. Number 1, listen to my voice. Shema koli, literally, heard my voice. And number 2, observed my watches or guards or observances. In Hebrew, yishmor mishmarti. Yishmor, guarded or kept. Mishmarti, my guard or kept or observed things. Are you Shabbos? Are you Shomer Shabbos? Shomer, to keep the Sabbath? Are you Shomer Shabbos? Keeper of Sabbath? That's this word, Shomer. Yishmor Mishmarti. Are you a keeper of the kept things? Abraham was. And God says, number 3, he kept my translated commandments. You want a translated commandments? Fine, then you have to say Abraham did the commandments. Fine. I translate it, set up things or establishments. I like that better. Kept my establishments, my mitzvotai, my mitzvot. 430 years before the mitzvot were given. And then my statutes, in case you don't agree with that, how about my statutes? He did my statutes, my chukotai, my chukot, my chukat, my statutes. He did those. That's why. Because I'm going to give you Israel because Abraham did Judaism. This is weird. By the way, I never, ever, in some 40 years, ever heard this taught. Ever. Not one single time. Never heard it mentioned, never heard it taught, never heard anybody say that Abraham did Judaism. Never. And lastly, Torotai, my Torah. Torahs, plural. My Torot, my instructions. You want to translate it laws? Fine. Then you have to say that Abraham did my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. I don't say laws. I say instructions, because that's what Torah means. You need to know this verse. You need to have this in your pocket. You need to know it. You need to be able to say, hey, Abraham did Judaism. It says it in Scripture. In 5 different ways it says it. And he was a Gentile. So you have no excuse. You're filled with the Holy Spirit, supposedly. You have no excuse. When I say you, I mean everybody who doesn't know this. Got me? John 8:39, they answered and said to him, Abraham is our father. And Yeshua said to them, if you're Abraham's kids, then do what Abraham did. What did Abraham do? He did Shema koli, yishmarti, mitzvotai, my chukotai, my torotai. Do that. You want to be like Abraham? Do that. Do Judaism. And finally, just like Abraham beat a 1,000,000-man army from Babylon, it's going to happen again. And what happens right after that? Right after that. After these things, Abraham's defeat of Babylon, the word of the Lord came to Abraham in a vision saying, don't be afraid, Abraham. Now comes your what? Your reward. That's the kingdom. And that's how it's going to be. Don't worry. Don't worry. You're going to face a 1,000,000-man army. Hellenism. Don't worry. Go out and beat them. And afterwards, you get the kingdom. That's our reward. Isaiah 11, and the leopard will lie down. You're never going to see this verse the way you did, ever again. What it says is the leopard will lie down with the young goat, and the little boy will lead them, and the cow and the bear will graze, and their young will lie down together. Isn't that beautiful? There's paintings that Christians have made of this beautiful verse, and it's called the Peaceable Kingdom, is what it's called. And there's a cow and a bear and a this and that, lions and stuff. And you're never going to see this the same again. Who's the leopard? Greece. And Greece will lie down with the young goat. Chad Gad Yah, Chad Gad Yah. Who's Chad Gad Yah at the end of Passover Seder? Israel. The little goat. That's Israel. So Greece will lie down with the Jews in the kingdom after Hellenism has been destroyed. Then Greece can lie down with the Gentiles can lie down with the Jews and rest. But only after Hellenism is destroyed. Does that make sense? That's what this is saying. And a little boy will lead them. Also the cow. There's several verses that say the cows of Bashan. The cows of Bashan. Bashan is the northern tribes of Israel. And it describes Israel, the northern tribes of Israel, as a cow. The cow, that's Ephraim or Israel, and the bear. Who's the bear? Medo-Persia. Israel and Medo-Persia will graze together in the kingdom. Their young will lie down together. And the lion, who's the lion? Babylon will eat straw like the ox, just like Israel. The bear. You got one today. Make them vegan. That's right. Make them like Israel.
Same thing with the bear.
Same thing with the bear. That's right. That's right. Bears are the opposite of vegan. They will not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. What's my holy mountain? Israel. Jerusalem. Zion. The kingdom. Here's the kingdom. Marching up to dancing up to Jerusalem in the kingdom. Here's the crown. For the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord as waters cover the sea. Do you want to know God? Do Judaism, right? Do people around you want to know God?
Not many.
There are those who do. They just don't know how to get there. The only way to get there is to lead them toward one goal. Only one. The kingdom. That's the goal. They don't have that as their goal. They might have Christ as their goal. They might have the blood of Christ as their goal. They might have Christianity as their goal. They might have peace, just a lack of strife as their goal. They might have family togetherness as their goal. Who knows? If they want to know God, they got to go toward the kingdom, and it's your job to get them there. That's your job. It's not enough that we get there. It's our job to get others there. Do you hear me? That's our job. That's what Jews have always done. Habakkuk 2:14 says exactly, almost exactly, word for word. The earth will be full of the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. It adds one word. The glory of the Lord, not just the Lord. So, you want to know God? You have to know His glory. The earth will be full of the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. The knowledge of the Lord, the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. Abraham knew God. He did Judaism. We want to know God. We're going to do Judaism so we can get to know God better and better and better. And remember, it's not, do you know Christ? Yes. Boom. I'm born again. I know Christ. I know God. I know God. I know God. I know God. Because the New Testament says the opposite. It says this: walk in a manner worthy of the Lord to please Him in all respects, bearing fruit in every mitzvah and increasing in the knowledge of God. If you know God like that when you're born again, how can you increase in the knowledge of God? You see what I'm saying? I know God. No, you don't. You either are increasing in that knowledge or you're not. Doing Judaism is what gives us an increase in our knowledge of God. It's not a one-time event. It's something that we grow and grow and grow, just like Abraham, our father. Let's pray. I know this was a lot, so I need to pray. Lord, I ask that you would please take all these concepts and seal it by your Spirit into both our spirit and our souls. In the name of Yeshua, I ask, Father God, that you would help us to remember. Help us bring it back, and bring it back, just like cud coming back up in the kosher beast. I ask that you would bring it back to us over and over and let it fold over and over on itself so that we come to know you better and better. Please do not let one grain of these pictures fall on bad ground. And don't let one single bird bite up and chew up and eat up any of these pictures. In the name of Yeshua, Father, protect this teaching. Thank you, Abba. Let's do the Aleinu, please. Let's stand. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol, l'tet gedula lo yitzer bereshit, shelo asanu kagoye ha'aratzot, velo samanu kemishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, v'gohor aleinu kakol hamonam. Let us adore the Lord of all, who in greatness created the world from of old, that he has not made us like the nations of the earth, not made us like the families of the land. He has not made our destiny like theirs, or cast our lot with all of them. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol ha'aretz, Bayom hahu, yiyeh Adonai echad, ushamo echad. And it is said, the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day, the Lord shall be one, and his name one. Va'anachnu korim, Umishtachavim umedim lifnei melech malachei hamalachim hakadosh baruch hu. And we bend the knee and bow in worship and give you thanks to the King of Kings, the Holy One. Blessed is he. We acknowledge before the King of Kings that there is none like him. There's nothing but him. As Torah says, know that the Lord, he is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. Ein od. There is nothing else. Shabbat Shalom.